Hello and welcome to our special broadcast. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The Indian government has said that it has negated Pakistan's attempt to target 15 military sites in northern and western India overnight. These places include Srinagar, Jammu, Amritsar and Bhuj. The Defence Ministry said India retaliated by targeting air defence systems in Pakistan. The government said that it has reliably learnt that air defence system at Lahore has been destroyed. Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, flanked by two women officers, addressed a press conference today. He said that the April 22nd attack on tourists in Pahalgam was the original escalation by Pakistan, and India responded with equal intensity. The Foreign Secretary also held up a picture of Lashkar-e-Toiba commander Hafiz Rauf leading funeral prayers for the terrorists killed in Operation Sindoor in the presence of Pakistani army officials. The Lashkar-e-Toiba has been designated a terrorist organization by the UN. There was heavy shelling late last night at the line of control as well. The Defence Ministry said 16 people were killed due to unprovoked firing from across the LOC in J&K. The ministry said that India was compelled to respond to bring mortar and artillery fire from Pakistan to a halt. Speaking at an event today in Delhi, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh hailed the precision with which Operation Sindoor was carried out.
जिस प्रेसिजन के साथ यानी जिस सटीकता के साथ ऑपरेशन सिंदूर एग्जीक्यूट किया गया वह अनइमेजिनेबल है, बहुत ही सराहनीय है। इसमें 9 टेररिस्ट कैंप्स तबाह हुए और अच्छी खासी संख्या में आतंकी मारे गए।
तो ये तक दावा करते हैं कि हम 3 राफेल हमने गिरा दिया, इतने हमने मिग गिरा दिए, और जब उनसे पूछा जाता है तो वो कहते हैं कि सोशल मीडिया में हमने ये सब चीजें देखी थी। तो अगर आधिकारिक तौर पर अगर आप कुछ कह सकें इस पर, ताकि उन्हें भी समझ में आए कि इस तरह के प्रोपेगेंडा नहीं चलने वाला है।
देखिए, जब सही समय होगा तो आधिकारिक तौर पे इसके बारे में सूचना दी जाएगी। इसमें अचरज की कोई बात नहीं है। आखिरकार ये एक देश है जिसने अपना इसका जन्म लेते ही झूठ शुरू हो गया था। 1947 में जब पाकिस्तानी फौज ने जम्मू कश्मीर पे दावा बोला तो उन्होंने किसी ऐसे वैसे व्यक्ति से नहीं, संयुक्त राष्ट्र से झूठ बोला कि हमारा कोई लेना देना नहीं है।
Political analyst Christine Fair joins us. Richard Rosso, senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Also on the show with us is Alex Plitzers, non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today. Alex, if I could begin with you. India, when it went for Operation Sindoor, post-midnight on 7th, we targeted 9 terror camps in Pakistan. Now, look at the manner in which Pakistan has tried to target 15 military sites in India. And these are big cities such as Amritsar, such as Punch, such as Ludhiana, Chandigarh, Jammu. What do you think this shows about Pakistan's intention? Are they now trying to escalate this into a full-blown conflict?
I mean, I think escalating into a full-blown conflict wouldn't be, desired, I think, by either side at this point. I think there's been statements made on the periphery that looking for a path to de-escalation. I think after the precision strikes that came in, what I would call a limited counterterrorism operation, which I think was conducted the right way. I mean, the jets didn't cross the border, missiles came across, they struck the targets, and there wasn't widespread collateral damage, and it wasn't, much bigger in size or scale or scope that would have, warranted or necessitated some sort of larger military response. So, surprised if that's the case to see, that scale of a potential retaliatory strike from Pakistan, if that's indeed what had transpired. And then it sounds like the air defense sites were struck in response. It's pretty clear there was a significant, air-to-air engagement, or at least shadowing across the border on that evening of the initial set of strikes. So the air defenses would make sense in terms of next target sets.
Right. Let me get in Christine Fair at this point. Christine, what's your view on the kind of stand that Pakistan has taken? Today, India linked the Pahalgam attack and said that this is directly connected to Asim Munir's speech, where he said that Kashmir is a jugular vein. We will never let the children forget what Kashmir is all about and what it means to the Pakistani people. Would you say that this is Asim Munir's war that Pakistan is waging?
All right, 2 things. I've been hearing this a lot. The fact of the matter is, every single army chief, and I might also add, every single prime minister has called Kashmir Pakistan's jugular vein. So you'll typically hear this kind of verbiage happening at passing out parades and so forth. So that speech itself is nothing remarkable. It's boilerplate Pakistani army chief language. But that doesn't mean that this isn't Munir's war. Munir is incredibly unpopular in Pakistan, largely surrounding the army's treatment of Imran Khan. So for the first time, really probably going back to Musharraf's period, the Pakistan army has really suffered a popularity hit. And it always sort of burnishes the image of the Pakistan army when you have a menacing India. And so an attack of this nature that happened in Pahalgam doesn't happen without the imprimatur of the ISI. I would say the reasons for it are multiple. As I have explained multiple times, I believe the Pakistan Army is an insurgent institution. It can't defeat India militarily. So how does an insurgent organization win? Well, it shows episodically that it hasn't been compelled or deterred by India, and it does that by launching terror attacks. One thing that really hasn't come up, of course, is that within the Pakistani discourse, there is a perduring belief with varying degrees of evidence that India is behind terrorism in Pakistan, particularly in Balochistan. This might also be behind the timing of the attack in Pahalgam. I know Indians are very loath to have that discussion, but if Indians are not aware of the fact that this is a very real and ongoing discussion in Pakistan, they're doing themselves a disservice in terms of understanding what the thinking is of the Pakistan army and that of the ordinary person on the ground.
Right, important points there. Let me also get in Rick Rosso at this point. Rick, what are your thoughts about the intense air-to-air engagement and ground engagement by India and Pakistan overnight? Pakistan targeted cities like Amritsar, Pathankot, at least 15 of them continuously. And the Indian side managed to neutralize and destroy, and I'm reading it out from the Indian Defense Ministry statement, we destroyed the air defense systems for Pakistan in Lahore, and also air radars in several other places were neutralized as well. How do you think India has responded right now to Pakistan's escalation?
Yeah, this is one of those moments when the two sides can choose once again to de-escalate. The fact that India was able to head off major attacks against urban areas provides that moment. We remember that in 2019, there was this weird stroke of luck where the pilot that was shot down landed safely and Pakistan handed him over that allowed de-escalation. So, we got a moment to breathe and pause. But, as of yesterday, we were kind of hoping that things would wrap up again as well. But you have seen an escalation. So my own sense is that you got more than a 50% chance at this point that you're going to see further steps. But, we're watching for some of the big things we've seen looking further back, like 2002, major troop mobilizations, things like that. We've seen some shutdowns of flights and things. Some Indian officials, evidently, or two, are dialing back some of the travel plans that they had. So, the other steps you see behind the scenes on girding for something a little bit longer, you see some of those wheels in motion, but not yet all of them, like major troop mobilizations. So at this point, it could be a moment they do pause, but it doesn't look like that's the way it's going. So now we're just kind of waiting after India knocked out the installations. What is Pakistan's next step going to be? And more steps on tit for tat is my own estimation on what's going to happen next.
All right. Alex, what do you think is the significance of air defense systems in Lahore being neutralized and other Pakistani missiles and drones being shot down by Indian forces? What does this show about the military operation and what has happened?
Sure. I think, well, there's the practical effects of doing so, but I think it was also meant to send a deterrent message, very similar to how the Israelis took out the radar systems in Iran, to send a message that the next time, not only can we reach and touch you, but you'll have a very difficult time trying to engage our aircraft if we do. So it was meant to be a literal counter response to what was transpiring in terms of the claims of attacks or potential attacks on 15 installations inside India, but then also, again, as a deterrence message. So I think, previous panelists just made a very poignant point there, and I think he's 100% correct. The tit for tat goes back and forth, but where this is dangerous at this point is, as we've seen, firefights and shelling started across the line of control, and there's a lot of tension along the line. And so there's always room for miscalculation, or if one of these steps results in significant casualties, that ups the pressure on the governments on either side to then continue the responsive blow back and forth. So I think it's a question of whether or not the Pakistani military received the deterrent message from the Indian military saying, hey, we can reach out and touch you. We hit the air defense sites. It'll give us freedom of movement over the top. Do you want to keep going back and forth? So it's a question of whether or not they're going to use an off-ramp here or whether the tit for tats are going to continue. And I think the estimation of 50-50 is correct, unfortunately. I think that's where we are.
Right. Christine, what would be your assessment as somebody who's watched India-Pakistan relations very closely, and you have seen this play out? Every army chief wants to make sure that Kashmir remains boiling, remains simmering, because this serves their political agenda. Where do you think this current army administration would like to take the current tensions with India?
So going to what Alex said, and I agreed with everything that he said, the problem is if we take Pulwama as an example in 2019, the off-ramp very easily presented itself. India claimed, although there has been no independent evidence of that it shot down an F-16, and Pakistan shot down a MiG, for which there was absolutely no doubt. So both countries had their pound of flesh. Both countries could satisfy their domestic politics, and that presented the off-ramp. What we don't have right now, going to Alex's point, is what that off-ramp is going to be. This round of strikes in Pakistan is not going to go unresponded to. This is just not something that Munir is not going to be able to tolerate a strike in Lahore taking out Pakistan's air defenses. I doubt that this is going to have the deterrent effect. And the reason for that is Pakistan wants to demonstrate that it can't be deterred. So right now, very much agreeing with what Alec, we're still very much in a conflict spiral. Munir is not like Kiani or even Musharraf. Munir is a particularly, what I'm looking for, offensive-oriented general. And so we're going to have to, there's going to have to be an off-ramp. And right now there's no off-ramp presented. And I'm pretty certain that India's attack in Lahore is going to ensure some sort of but some sort of certain Pakistani retaliation. So what would be really ideal at this juncture is if international diplomacy could prevail upon Pakistan to sort of take this on the chin. That would be ideal, but this would require some buy-offs. This would require some pretty serious carrots in conjunction with some fairly serious sticks. And unfortunately, what we've seen in the past is that the international community has been very wary of wielding sticks when it comes to Pakistan. So for the time being, I don't see this off-ramp to de-escalation. And I actually foresee there being a significant retaliation to this Lahore strike. I just want to say more generally, people who thought that Pakistan, just because India had launched 9 attacks that were very proportionate and specifically aimed at eliminating terrorist infrastructure, people who thought that Pakistan would take that on the chin were really misguided. Those strikes that landed, and maybe had the strikes only been contained to Pakistan-administered Kashmir, maybe there was some chance that Pakistan would have responded in kind across the LOC and Indian-administered Kashmir. But when India chose to, and I'm not disagreeing with the selection of the targets. In fact, I applaud India for doing this. These are 2 groups that need to be eliminated. But the attacks in the Punjab were not going to go unanswered. The Punjab is Pakistan's heartland. It's the heartland of the Pakistan army. It's the heartland of Pakistan's economy. So unfortunately, it left Munir no choice but to respond in kind. And I'll also just say in passing, let's look 2 weeks out, and hopefully by 2 weeks, we're going to be through this crisis slide. There's going to be some normalcy that will gradually recur. It's just a statement of fact that after a few years, we're going to be here again. These strikes do not change anything strategically. What it takes to change Pakistan's thinking strategically is a decisive defeat of the Pakistan army. And this is not something that India can deliver at this time or in the policy-relevant future.
Right. Rick and Christine, some very important points there about how this will not go unanswered by Pakistan. Rick, Donald Trump last night said that it is terrible what's happening. I'm going to ask both sides to stop. Do you think right now the United States will be able to make Pakistan stop here?
Well, I'll hand it to Dr. Fair. She's by far the expert on the Pakistan side of the equation. But I would say overall, the fact that the Trump administration hasn't filled a lot of roles that would typically be the day managers for something like this, and even some of the senior folks we had at the State Department that have been working in South Asia across multiple crises in the past and have experience, are all out of government now. So we have a really light bench in terms of people that have that kind of experience. We have a change in the National Security Advisor. You've got somebody that's managing both that role as well as Secretary of State. So we may have the intent to try to play an active role on both sides with whatever tools we may have, which is, I think, to some extent reduced today versus, 10, 20 years ago in Pakistan. But we don't have the personnel sometimes to be able to commit to it the way that we might have times in the past. Senior folks that have that kind of gravitas and experience, who are being teed up in their messaging by people that have been through this 10, 15 times in the past. We're a little bit on the light side. So for the United States to play a meaningful role, to me, doesn't look that great, except for on the upside on the India front, which is, we have great talks between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. We have a trade deal that's moving. So in as much as Prime Minister Modi is thinking de-escalation is going to be good for creating jobs and helping the economy, because there's a lot of good stuff on the table that India can achieve today that might not have been the case in 1999 or 2002, then, that might help India put a bit of a break on a further escalation. But in terms of active involvement, to me, I don't think we got the right team, the right setup to be as active in that space as we might have been in times past.
All right. We are going to take a short break, but we'll request Alex, Rick Rosso and Christine to stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching our special broadcast on Operation Sindoor, which continues. The military operation is not over. We still have the political analyst Christine Fair, Richard Rosso of Center for Strategic and International Studies, and Alex Plitzas, non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Councils. Alex, give us a sense of, the kind of propaganda we're seeing from Pakistan. The propaganda machinery there has been working overtime. They are recycling, bringing to the fore old pictures of fighter jets or videos or drones which have crashed in Indian territory to claim they have shot down Pakistani fighters and shot down Indian Air Force jets and Indian missiles as well. Could you give us a sense of how you see this? There were Pakistani foreign ministers, defense ministers, when they were asked about these claims, they said the news of fighter jets being shot down is all over social media. The Pakistani Prime Minister has also made that claim. India today has said that Pakistan has a habit of lies in this manner. How do you see these claims? Would you weigh in on this propaganda by Pakistan of shooting down these fighter jets?
Sure. I mean, just to start with it more broadly, and I think Richard, the good doctor here, have seen this themselves as well. In following, I don't know how many number of conflicts at this point, I have not seen what I would describe as this level of utter and complete nonsense in terms of misinformation that's floating around on the internet since well before the conflict started. I mean, if before the strike back across the border from India in response to the attack, if you followed social media, the entire Indian Air Force had been shot down. The line of control had been violated over 1,000 times, and both armies had seemed to manage to invade each other's countries. If you're following what was going online, it was absolutely ridiculous. Some of the propaganda is meant for a domestic political audience and consumption. In terms of, we've got something back, we have a scalp, so to speak, here to hold on to. So meant to give sort of a win or frame the narrative. And then some of it are just actors who are online just spreading nonsense, which makes it very difficult, one, to follow, but two, it also adds additional political pressure on top of the government in both countries to say, we need to do something because it looks like the adversary on either side of the line is doing, something that requires a military response. So this is just another example of where, propaganda or misinformation, as it gets labeled sometimes, can be incredibly dangerous and help to fuel a conflict as well. particularly when it's ethnic or religious based. In this case, it's largely around military operations and who did or who did not shoot down aircraft or things of that nature. But we see that in other places around the world, like Ukraine, where they're dehumanized by the Russians as they're in the midst of their war there. So dangerous, and those types of things are not helpful. But the reasons why are clearly understood.
Right. Christine, if I could get you in now, we have seen Pakistan firing very heavily ever since Operation Sindoor happened, and they've been using artillery shelling all along the LOC and the international border, especially in Poonch area. We've lost about 15 civilians there. Could you give us a sense of why Pakistani forces are hitting at Poonch in such a strong manner, and why civilian areas are being targeted repeatedly? Because when we targeted those terror camps in Pakistan, we did not target civilians.
All right, because you believe your own narrative. First thing you have to understand is that Pakistan doesn't view your narrative as you see it. So, by the way, I largely share India's narrative. I want to chime in a little bit on Alex's point. In 2019, the Indians made a patent false claim that it had shot down an F-16. There's been no evidence whatsoever for that claim. So from my point of view, I see a lot of propaganda coming from both sides. And in general, I tend to demur from commenting upon information that hasn't been independently verified. To your larger question, India views that it has hit these targets proportionately. By the way, I share that assessment because I study most of my career. I've spent studying Lashkar-e-Taiba and to some extent Jaish-e-Mohammed. But Pakistan, you have to understand, your ordinary Pakistanis don't understand these groups to be terrorists. So from an average Pakistani point of view, you in fact did hit civilians. And so not only did you hit civilians, you hit civilians in the Punjab. And so to really understand why the Pakistanis are responding as they're responding, you have to understand how Pakistanis view this strike. And unfortunately, your average Pakistani strike doesn't share the interpretation that the average Indian does. And I would just say more generally, this has been part of the reason why Pakistan continues to do what it does. Your average Pakistani doesn't view Lashkar-e-Taiba participating in terrorism. I've done enormous studies of Lashkar-e-Taiba. I've done studies on thousands of their fighter biographies. They view themselves of engaging in a just conflict against an Indian aggressor. And so if you don't take time to understand how the Pakistanis understand things, you're going to make misjudgments about what the Pakistanis do in response. And this is largely how I see the Indian confusion over the Pakistani response, is that it's largely in its own echo chamber, and it hasn't seriously engaged the Pakistani echo chamber.
Right. Those are very important points. Thank you very much, Christine Fair, Rick Rosso, and Alex for joining us on the program. We are clearly looking at a tense few days, and as Christine said, Asim Munir and the Pakistani army won't stop here. There is bound to be some response, and if it is escalatory, if it is completely out of control, then India will also have to respond. Pakistan's response is not in our control. Let's see what happens in the days to come. Richard Rosso, Alex, and Christine, thank you once again for being with us.